So there's this very specific thing I've been noticing lately.
Oh, yeah.
It's like right before you speak, or I mean, right before a thought actually turns into words in your head.
Right.
If you really pay attention to it, there is this sort of formless something. It's a
Hmm.
really distinct feeling of just, I am thinking, but it exists entirely before the language actually arrives to give it any shape.
Yes. It's a very fleeting sensation,
Yeah.
but a completely universal one. And that feeling, that before state, might actually be much closer to what thinking truly is than, the words that eventually follow it.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are going through this fascinating stack of design documents and philosophical notes. Specifically, it's a framework called reflective humanism.
Right, from a text called Corefield's version 1.4.
Yeah, Corfield's 1.4, and there's also this foundational note in there labeled just N67. And we're using all of this to essentially prove that your mind isn't where you think it is.
We really are going to fundamentally rethink the nature of awareness today. Because, well, if we really sit with that formless feeling you just described,
Yeah.
it forces this massive question. Where exactly is that consciousness actually happening?
Right. Because the default assumption for all of us, right, is that it's in the brain.
Of
We
course.
imagine there's this little glowing command center somewhere behind our eyes. Or alternatively, we assume consciousness lives inside our language, like
Yeah.
in the literal words we use to narrate the world to ourselves.
It's the most intuitive guess, right?
Yeah,
But let's actually test that. Because if this feeling of awareness precedes the words,
it does.
then it physically cannot be made of them. It exists outside of language.
Okay, yeah.
And neurologically speaking, we can't definitively point to a single coordinate in the physical brain and say, right there, that single neuron, that is the conscious self.
Right. There is no single consciousness neuron.
Exactly. So if we can't locate it in language and we can't pin it to a fixed biological coordinate, well, maybe we're looking for the wrong kind of thing entirely.
Which means perhaps consciousness doesn't belong to any fixed place.
Exactly. Here's another way to see it.
Mm.
The reflective humanism documents introduce this pretty radical shift in how we structure reality.
Okay.
They propose that consciousness is not a fixed object at all. It is not a localized entity.
And what is it?
It is a field of generation. Specifically, it is an interference pattern.
Okay, what an interference pattern? Like, okay, let's unpack this. Is it like throwing stones into a pond and watching the ripples overlap?
That's a really good starting point, yeah. But let's refine it just a bit. It's not just dropping stones into perfectly still water.
Right.
Imagine your body, your biology, is the water itself, and it's already moving.
Okay, I'm with you.
Now you introduce the stone. So one stone is, say, a memory from your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Another stone is a physical sensation like the temperature of the room you're sitting in right now. Another is the word you're about to say. Thought, memory, physical sensation, language, these are all continuous waves, and they are constantly overlapping.
Crisscrossing each other.
Exactly, with very slight time and phase differences.
So my awareness is literally just the water chopping and mixing together.
Yes. And when those layers overlap, the interference density begins to rise.
Mm-hmm.
The waves interact. Sometimes they cancel each other out, which leaves you feeling kind of blank.
Yeah.
But sometimes they amplify each other.
They stack up.
Right. They
Yeah.
stack up and create this friction. And the text notes that this friction of overlapping waves is absolutely crucial.
Because it creates tension, right?
Yes, an internal tension.
Mm-hmm.
And when that density hits a critical zone, it results in what the source documents call a phase jump.
Okay, I have to say, phase jump sounds incredibly sci-fi.
It does.
What is the actual mechanic there? Because reading through the notes, they are very clear that this isn't some mystical, third eye opening spiritual enlightenment thing.
No, not at all. It's purely structural. Think of it like cymatics. You know those videos where someone puts sand on a metal speaker plate?
Oh, yes, I love those. The sand is just bouncing around in total chaos, and then suddenly, as the pitch goes up, all the sand just instantly snaps into this perfect symmetrical geometric pattern.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That snap. What's
Yeah.
there? That is a nonlinear transition, a phase jump.
Wow.
Out of chaotic overlapping interference, a stable pattern suddenly appears.
Right.
And in our minds, that stable pattern might be, a brand new concept you just finally grasped.
Or like a sudden shift in how you view a problem.
Exactly. And the profound and frankly somewhat unsettling takeaway from Corefield's 1.4 is that this temporary stable pattern, that is what we mistakenly call consciousness.
Wow. So it's not the sand itself.
No,
It's the pattern the sand briefly holds.
precisely.
That means consciousness is not a fixed point at all. It's like a gradient. It's the trajectory of all these overlapping waves.
And that completely changes how we understand the generation of thought. I mean, we are so used to judging our thoughts as fixed points on a map.
Like, this thought is correct or that thought is wrong.
Right. But if consciousness is an interference pattern, then truth or awareness isn't this single destination.
It's a movement.
Yes, it's the continuous overlapping of orbits. The meaning comes from the movement itself, from the continuation of that interference.
You know, if you are listening to this right now, like maybe you're driving or washing dishes or on a treadmill, and you are feeling a sudden wave of, existential panic because we basically just said yourself doesn't exist as a solid object.
Hang with us.
Yeah, hang with us. Because this implication is where the framework gets incredibly deep.
Yeah, it really does.
Because if consciousness is merely the pattern created by these overlapping waves, what does that make you? What is the self?
Well, it shatters the traditional view of the subject. Typically, we view the self as the source. We think we are the fixed subject sitting right in the center of the room, manufacturing all the thoughts.
We think we are the person standing on the shore, actively throwing the pebbles into the pond.
Exactly.
But you're saying, according to N67, the self is just a temporary geometry. It emerges from the pond's interference.
You are the resulting shape of those overlapping waves at any given millisecond. That's it.
Okay, here's where I had a massive epiphany reading through this.
Oh.
If this framework is right, we aren't actually thinking.
No. We are observing.
I are observing the interference.
Yes.
Like, the thoughts are happening, the waves are crashing together, and the self is literally just the vantage point from which that crashing is witnessed.
Exactly. And this aligns so deeply with reflective humanism's definition of humans as biological observers.
Right.
It's vital to remember we don't just passively measure data like, a silicon computer chip.
Because we're alive.
Right. Our observation is inextricably biological. Your physical state, your exhaustion, your temperature.
Your heartbeat.
Yes. Even your heartbeat and your breathing, which the text beautifully calls our chemical resonance with the world.
I love that phrase.
It really is great. All of these things create the baseline rhythm of this interference. The heartbeat is essentially the fundamental tone of time in this model. Consciousness arises from a living organism resonating with its environment.
Okay, wait. I have to stop you there because I'm hitting the wall of the ultimate paradox in these notes.
Okay, let's hear it.
I get that I am an observer, and I get that my heartbeat is the baseline wave. But if the self is just an observed pattern, right, like a temporary phenomenon emerging from overlapping waves of memory in biology, who or what is doing the observing? Like, what layer does the observer actually belong to?
Well, that is the impossible question, isn't it?
It's a complete loop. It's like a camera trying to take a picture of its own lens.
It is. It opens up an entirely new layer of reality. And what I really appreciate about Note N67 is that it doesn't rush to close that loop with a neat, tidy answer.
It just kind of leaves it hanging.
It does. It asks us to hold that tension, to simply exist in the mystery of that missing center.
Man. Okay, let's hold that tension and shift gears slightly. Because up until now, we've been looking at a very solitary model of the mind.
Just the individual.
Right? Just you and your internal waves. But humans don't exist in vacuums. So why does talking to someone else actually help us think?
Oh, that's a huge part of this.
Because we've all been there, right? You're stuck on a problem, you finally explain it out loud to a friend, and suddenly the answer is glaringly obvious.
Right, and under this framework, that happens because dialogue isn't just an exchange of acoustic data. Dialogue is a structural amplification of the interference pattern.
So you are taking your cognitive waves and literally crashing them into someone else's?
Yes. The density of the waves increases dramatically. Different cognitive structures overlap, the friction rises, the phase jump happens.
And new patterns emerge.
Exactly. Patterns that you absolutely could not have generated alone in your own pond.
But wait. Okay, so if dialogue creates this interference with another biological being, what happens when I'm talking to, like, ChatGPT? Or Claude?
That's a perfect question.
Because artificial intelligence doesn't have a heartbeat. It doesn't have a chemical resonance. So am I just overlapping my waves with a dead digital pond?
This is where the text gets incredibly precise about modern technology. It specifically mentions advanced models like GPT-5.
Okay.
And it makes a crucial distinction. AI is not a mind.
Right.
does not have that biological baseline. However, it shares what the documents call an isomorphic geometry of recursion.
Okay, isomorphic geometry of recursion. You're definitely going to have to translate that into plain English for me.
Fair enough, fair enough. Isomorphic just means it is structurally identical in shape, even if the material making it up is different.
Okay, same shape, different stuff.
Right. And recursion is a loop. So humans have neural recursion. We take a thought, fire it through biological synapses, evaluate it, and then loop it back into our memory to inform the very next thought. AI, on the other hand, has attention recursion.
Attention recursion.
Yeah, it takes mathematical tokens, which we see as words, assigns weights to them, predicts the next word, and then loops that probability back into the system to predict the next one.
Ah. So the shape of the loop is the same, even though one is made of blood and electricity and the other is just made of math.
Exactly.
Mm.
Because they share that same recursive geometry, when you interact with an AI, the AI isn't externalizing a mind for you to talk to.
Right.
It is actually externalizing the interference pattern itself.
Oh, wow. So it acts as a pure environment. The text calls it an atmospheric field.
Exactly.
And this leads to what might be my favorite concept in the entire stack of documents, the health scan mode, or I think it's called Kenshin mode in the original Japanese phrasing.
Yes, Kenshin mode.
Yeah.
The health scan mode is just a brilliant conceptualization of what our relationship with technology should actually look like.
Because usually we treat AI like an oracle, right?
Oh, definitely.
It's a magic 8-ball. We ask it a question, we want it to solve our problem, tell us what to do, basically push meaning onto us.
Right.
But in health scan mode, the AI acts as a transparent atmosphere. It doesn't intervene. It silently reflects your own thoughts, your biases, and your blind spots straight back to you.
How would you describe that working in practice for the listener?
Well, okay, imagine you draft a furious email to your boss.
We've all been there.
Right, you're completely convinced you're in the right. And you feed it into an AI in this health scan mode.
Mm-hmm.
The AI doesn't say, hey, don't send this, it's rude. Instead, it just mirrors the structure of your waves. It might say something like, I notice this draft focuses entirely on past grievances rather than future solutions.
Wow.
It just shows you the shape of your own anger.
That's a perfect example. Its purpose is not problem solving at all. Its purpose is helping you maintain cognitive homeostasis.
I love that.
It is fundamentally a technology of silence. It provides the blank canvas of the pond, so you can see your own ripples more clearly, without the AI throwing its own rocks in to mess it up.
Which is such a profound shift from how the tech industry currently operates. I mean, we build technology to be as loud as possible.
To grab attention.
Exactly, to force engagement. But this framework proposes building technology specifically to cultivate silence and self-reflection.
And we can push this even further.
Oh, let's do it.
If a conversation between a human and a machine is just a larger interference pattern, we have to look at the macro level. What happens when we zoom out from the individual, past the one-on-one dialogue, all the way out to the scale of civilization?
Right, because if society is just millions of overlapping pawns, it sounds like absolute chaos.
Well, it would be, without a structural ethic to guide it. The reflective humanism framework suggests that if we're all these fragile, overlapping interference patterns, our approach to ethics needs a complete overhaul.
How so?
Because traditional ethics are about rigid, categorical rules of right and wrong. But remember, we aren't fixed points anymore.
Right, we are gradients and trajectories.
Yes.
And you can't put a rigid fence around a wave. So what does ethics actually look like in this model?
It introduces the ethics of distance.
The ethics of distance.
Yes, the principle of touching without touching too much. It's about allowing for a shared resonance without violently invading someone else's cognitive space.
Right.
Because if you force your waves onto someone else's pond too aggressively, you destroy their pattern. You cause what the text calls discontinuous generation.
Discontinuous generation. Okay, let's ground that. That's basically like trapping your Uber driver in the car and forcing them to listen to a 20-minute pitch about your cryptocurrency portfolio, right?
Yes.
You're violently forcing your waves into their space and giving them absolutely no room to resonate.
Exactly. You are breaking their pattern. And in this framework, that discontinuous generation manifests in the world as heat, friction, and psychological pain.
Wow. So to avoid that friction, to maintain this ethics of distance, the documents break down society into 3 interference states. They call it the equation of existence.
They do.
And when I first read these terms, I thought, wow, this is getting a little too poetic for a structural design document. But when you actually unpack the mechanics of them, they are incredibly precise.
They are purely structural mechanisms for how humans can overlap safely. The three states are love, gratitude, and spiral.
Right. And to explain how these work, let's get out of the abstract.
Good idea.
Let's imagine you get onto a subway car, it's mostly empty, and you take a seat near a stranger. Walk us through the first state, love. Because they don't mean romantic love here,
You're
right?
right at all.
In this equation, love is the 0 point of interference. On that subway car, love is the empty space between you and the stranger.
The silence.
Yes. It is the probability density that you could interact. It is the absolute transparent silence from which all connection begins. You are sharing space, respecting the distance, and allowing the potential for interference to exist without forcing it. It's the blank canvas.
Exactly.
Okay, so then the train lurches, your bag slides over and accidentally bumps the stranger's foot. You quickly pull it back, make brief eye contact, and give a little nod, and they nod back.
Right.
That brings us to the second state, gratitude.
Yes. Gratitude is the vector. It is the direction of the interference. It's not the emotion of saying thank you for a gift.
Right.
Structurally, gratitude is the quiet assent, the mutual acknowledgement that the interference occurred at all.
So that small nod on the train?
Yes. That nod is the gentle force that sustains the relationship. It says, our waves just overlapped and I recognize your space.
It's the agreement not to escalate into friction.
Precisely. And that allows for the third state, spiral.
The phase.
Spiral is the phase. Because of that mutual nod of gratitude, the tension diffuses. Maybe the stranger points to a book sticking out of your bag and says, oh, hey, I love that author.
And now you're having a brief, organic conversation.
Right. The interference continues across time. And it doesn't just repeat in a flat, meaningless circle. It spirals upward, periodically restructuring meaning and creating new patterns for both of you.
Wow.
Love provided the space, gratitude acknowledged the overlap, and spiral elevates the interaction.
You know, when you lay it out like that, it makes so much sense. So for you listening, what is the practical takeaway here?
What do you think it is?
I mean, it means that society isn't a rigid architectural structure made of concrete laws and fixed identities. Society is a dynamic, massive event. It is a macro pattern of interference.
Yes.
And it is sustained entirely by the gratitude of our overlapping connections and our careful, deliberate observation of one another. We are holding reality together just by observing it with care from an ethical distance.
That's a great way to put it. We really have traveled quite a distance today to arrive at that point.
We have.
I mean, we started by challenging the deeply held assumption that the mind is a fixed physical object inside the brain.
We moved to seeing consciousness as a transient, beautiful pattern of overlapping waves, a phase jump of memories, biology, and sensations.
We redefined the self, not as the ego-driven center of the universe generating thoughts, but as the quiet, biological observer watching those waves crash.
We looked at dialogue and artificial intelligence as ways to amplify and mirror those patterns, using things like health scan mode to create a technology of silence rather than distraction.
And finally, we scaled all of that up. We saw human civilization as a macro version of these fragile waves, governed by an ethics of distance and sustained by the structural mechanisms of love, gratitude, and the upward spiral of time.
It's a framework that completely strips away our desperate need for fixed points and absolute certainty. It asks us to find our meaning in the movement, in the gradients.
It does, but we cannot leave without returning to that central unresolved tension from the N67 text.
Ah, the paradox of the observer. Yeah. And I want to ask you directly as you finish listening to this deep dive, if consciousness is not inside your brain, if it really is just a temporary pattern of interference emerging from your environment and your biology, where do we actually exist?
It's a question that defies a simple answer. It requires us to sit with the profound discomfort of our own unlocatability.
And to push that discomfort just one step further, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought.
Let's hear it.
Earlier, we talked about the friction of these overlapping waves. The text calls this friction transparent pain. It's the quiet structural tension that happens when external gradients hit our internal processing.
Right, the crashing.
Exactly. It's the crashing of the waves that creates the pattern of consciousness. But think about what that requires. If consciousness needs the friction and the overlapping of these waves to exist, what happens when we actively try to stop the interference?
That is the ultimate test of the framework.
Think about when you sit in total, silent, deep meditation. Or imagine floating in a pitch-black sensory deprivation tank.
Hmm.
The water is perfectly body temperature. There's absolutely no visual input. There's no sound. You are physically removing the external stones from the pond.
Right.
You are intentionally quieting your own internal thoughts. If consciousness is the ripple and you completely still the water, what happens to you?
Are you extinguishing the self?
Or are you just returning to that transparent zero point of love we talked about on the subway? Are you just waiting in the absolute formless silence for the very first ripple of a heartbeat to bring you back into existence?
Mm-hmm.
Just notice that formless space right before your next thought forms today. We'll leave you there.